we're never getting another Lost. Not because we don't want one, but because the world that made Lost possible doesn't exist anymore. Streaming fractured the audience, algorithms killed patience, and binge culture erased the weekly ritual that made Lost a phenomenon. This isn't just about television, it's about how we stopped watching together, stopped wondering together, and started consuming alone. Back in 2004, when Lost premiered, television was still a shared experience. You didn't need 10 subscriptions to keep up. You just needed a TV and a time slot. Lost aired on ABC and millions tuned in together. It wasn't just a show, it was a weekly event. You'd watch it live, talk about it the next day, and spend the rest of the week theorizing about what it all meant. It was communal, it was cultural, it was ritual. Today, that kind of unity is gone. The streaming boom shattered the audience into silos. You might love Ted Lasso, but are you subscribed to Apple TV Plus just for that? Maybe you caught Creepshow on Shudder, or The Traitors on Peacock, but odds are, you didn't. Unless it's Netflix or Disney Plus, most shows don't carry cultural weight anymore. Stranger Things and The Mandalorian are exceptions, not the rule. Everything else? Fragmented, niche, ephemeral. We're not watching the same things. We're not talking about the same things. And that means no show can dominate the cultural conversation the way Lost did. It's not just about quality, it's about reach. Lost had reach, it had scale, it had gravity, and it had time. Lost didn't just air weekly, it thrived weekly. Each episode was a cliffhanger, a puzzle, a provocation. You watched, then you waited. And in that waiting, you talked, you theorized, you joined fan casts, early podcasts dedicated entirely to decoding Lost's mysteries. What were the numbers? Who was the Man in Black? What was the Dharma Initiative really up to? These weren't just plot points, they were cultural currency. Today, that rhythm is gone. Netflix pioneered the binge model, and now it's the norm. Shows drop all at once. You finish them in a weekend, maybe you tweet about them, maybe you don't, but by Monday, it's over. That's not how you build mythology. That's not how you build community. That's how you burn through content. Even shows that do prioritize seasonal arcs, like Buffy the Vampire Slayer, The X-Files, or Star Trek Deep Space Nine, still operated within the weekly format. And that format mattered. Buffy had Monster of the Week episodes. The X-Files was Case of the Week. DS9 was Adventure of the Week. But within those standalone stories, there were breadcrumbs, a line of dialogue, a cryptic reference, something that didn't mean much in the moment, but would resonate later once the arc came more into focus. That's how long-form storytelling worked in the 1990s and early 2000s. You had to earn it, you had to wait, and you had to remember. And that was no small feat, mind you. DVRs didn't exist. Streaming didn't exist. If you wanted to tape a show, you had to hope it wasn't airing at the same time as another show you liked because you only had one tape in the VCR. TiVo changed the game when it launched. Suddenly, you could record multiple shows at once, even if they aired on different networks. You didn't need to load a tape because it was all digital. But even then, DVR space was limited. You had to want that show. You had to make room for it. Choosing to record something meant choosing to invest. Streaming removed that friction entirely. Now, you don't record, you browse. You don't commit, you sample. If a show doesn't grab you in the first 10 minutes, you drop it. No guilt, no loss, and that abundance of choice, paradoxically, makes it harder for any one show to matter. Because when everything is available, nothing feels essential. It's the difference between streaming and the video store. Not Blockbuster, the local mom and pop video store. The one with staff picks, the one where the guy behind the counter would recommend Donnie Darko or The Iron Giant because he loved them. That was curation. That was discovery. Streaming platforms don't have that. They have algorithms. They have thumbnails. They have because you watched. But they don't have taste. They don't have personality. And they don't have trust. The video store offered more than just movies. It fostered a sense of community that streaming platforms struggle to replicate. Unlike the local video store with its staff picks and personal recommendations, streaming services are fragmented across numerous platforms, each with their own originals. This abundance of choice dilutes shared cultural moments and fragments audiences, making it harder for any one show to bring people together like the video store once did. And even when a show does break through on streaming, like Squid Game did back in 2021, it faces another hurdle: time. Squid Game was a global phenomenon, the biggest show of the year, but season 2 didn't arrive until December of 2024. That's a 3-year gap. Let's not pretend there wasn't some fall off. The cultural momentum faded, the urgency dissolved. Traditionally, TV shows released a new season every year. That cadence created appointment viewing. You knew when to expect it. You built your calendar around it. Today's landscape is different. Shows return when the showrunner feels like it, or when the network decides it's worth the budget, or when the algorithm says the metrics justify it. That approach doesn't work for most shows, especially coming-of-age stories. Cobra Kai is a prime example. The show spans about 2 to 3 years in universe, but the cast has aged visibly across 6 seasons. At some point, the illusion breaks. The high school setting starts to feel absurd, and that's not the fault of the actors. It's the fault of the release model. The best coming-of-age shows, Beverly Hills 90210, Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Dawson's Creek, One Tree Hill, grew up with their casts. They aired consistently. They evolved naturally. You watch the characters mature because the show itself matured. That's impossible when seasons drop every 2 or 3 years. The rhythm is gone. The growth is stunted. And even if a show tried to replicate Lost's structure, it wouldn't have the space. Lost's first season had 25 episodes. Season 2 had 24. Season 3 had 23. Even Season 4, shortened by the writer's strike at the time, had 14. That kind of runway doesn't exist anymore. Most streaming shows get 8 episodes, maybe 10. That's barely enough to sketch a plot, let alone build a mystery. Lost gave us time. Time for flashbacks, time for character arcs, time for slow burns. You didn't just learn what happened, you learned why it mattered. You saw the past, the trauma, the choices. You understood the people before you understood the island. Today's shows cut that fat, and with it, they cut the soul. They streamline everything. No flashbacks, no side plots, just core narrative, fast and clean. But Lost wasn't clean. It was messy, human, ambitious, and that's why it mattered. And here's another thing that we've lost: rewatchability. After I finished Breaking Bad, I had no desire to go back and rewatch it. The story was over. I saw El Camino when it hit Netflix in 2019, but I still didn't feel compelled to revisit the original show. Even when Better Call Saul came out, I didn't bite. There was nothing in Breaking Bad that made me want to re-experience it. It was a one-and-done narrative. Compare that to Star Trek Deep Space Nine. That show had something new going on every week. It wasn't called Star Trek The Dominion War, and I can't stand it when people say that DS9 was only about the Dominion War. That arc was important, sure, but it wasn't everything. You could turn on a random episode and get a compelling story. You didn't need to binge the whole thing to feel satisfied. That's the problem with shows like Breaking Bad and Cobra Kai. You can't just dip in, dip out. You have to commit. You have to watch every episode in order. And that's fine for hardcore fans, but casual viewing is how hardcore fans are born. That's how it happened for me with Avatar: The Last Airbender. I didn't get into that show until halfway through season 2. I checked out the DVDs from my local library, and by the time season 3 premiered, I was watching every week on Nickelodeon. I didn't want to miss an episode. And Avatar, despite having a clear overarching narrative, defeat the Fire Lord before Sozin's Comet arrives, still had standalone episodes. In fact, most people, including myself, believe the best episodes were the standalones. They expanded the mythology, they deepened the characters, and a lot of times they did both. That's what made the show rich. That's what made it rewatchable. TV today doesn't do that. All episodes flow together, one right after the other. Therefore, no episode truly stands on its own. They're all interconnected. And when everything is interconnected, nothing stands out. You don't get those singular episodes that linger in your memory. You don't get the Hush from Buffy, or the Visitor from DS9, or Zuko Alone from Avatar. You get chapters. You get plot progression, but you don't get moments. And that's the irony. In trying to make every episode essential to the arc, modern TV has made no episode essential to the viewer. You can't drop in, you can't revisit, you can't recommend just one to a friend. You have to pitch the whole thing, and that's a harder sell. Lost had episodes you could rewatch on their own. The Constant, Walkabout, Through the Looking Glass. They were part of the larger story, yes, but they were also emotionally complete. They had structure, they had payoff, they had identity. Today's shows often feel like they're afraid to pause, afraid to detour, afraid to breathe, because breathing takes time, and time is something the algorithm doesn't reward. And that brings us back to the core problem: architecture. Lost wasn't just a show, it was a cathedral, built slowly, layered deeply, designed to be explored. Today's shows are pop-up tents, fast to assemble, easy to dismantle, completely disposable. We've lost the scaffolding that made shows like Lost possible. We've lost the patience, the pacing, the ritual. We've lost the trust between creators and audiences. And in its place, we've built a system that values speed over substance, metrics over meaning, and completion rates over connection. So no, we're not getting another Lost. Not because we don't want one, but because the world that made Lost possible is gone. And maybe that's okay. Maybe something new will rise from the rubble. But if you're wondering why nothing feels quite like Lost anymore, it's not nostalgia, it's architecture.